And so thinking about that idea about the process, right? And results, right? There's the results, which are at the destination. And then there's the process, which is the journey, right? And so just thinking about, you know, if we're so focused on the destination, how often do we think about how we get there? And if we're not focused on how we get there, then what are we doing to make sure that people aren't cutting corners, that they're not providing, shoddy halfway service, that they're not leading people as taskmasters, right? You know, I had a, I had a boss who, she used to win at all cost. And it didn't matter who she was talking to or whatever project it
Hmm.
was, she had to win. She had to be the one that got what she wanted. And it was successful for the short term. But she didn't last more than maybe 5 years. She'd worn herself out
Yeah.
because if you're so focused on that destination and winning at all costs, what is the relationship that you're building with other people who also have needs, also have interests, and also have results that they need to accomplish, right? And so if you're not building those relationships, who's going to go to bat for you? Who's going to have that nice word to say about you or how you, perform, right? And so just thinking about, if we need to make sure our WPR is up, what are we doing? And you hear people work first county, and things like that. And so what does a work first county mean? It means the first thing that you do is you go out and job search. Once you job search and you are successful in that, that unlocks the door to the rest of the services that we have, right?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, some people are ready to find a job. Some people aren't. We were just having this conversation in Shasta County yesterday, right? I mean, there are some folks who are ready to go. Maybe they just got laid off or they just finished school or whatever else it is, and they are ready to look for work. And there are other people who maybe there are some barriers to them being successful in looking for work, or maybe they've looked for work and they haven't been able to find it. Maybe they are looking for something that's maybe unrealistic or something that, in a different field, or "Oh, I'm not working for minimum wage or anything else like that that can hinder their ability to be successful in accomplishing the results we want. But if we are able to really think about how do we help them overcome some of those challenges that keep them from achieving those results, it's the journey, right? If we're just pushing people to find work, you're gonna have people who find work, and then there's going to be a revolving door, just like we did with the first job club that I mentioned, right? It's
Yeah.
short term. It's a patch on a festering wound, right? It's a band-aid on an open wound, right? How do we heal that? How do we help really? I had a client one time ask me for mental health services, and I had to tell her, I can't provide that for you right now until you finish a job search,
Yeah.
right? And I've never looked for a job. I'm 42 years old, never worked outside the house. She just got out of an abusive relationship. I mean, she had the courage to leave that, but she had never actually walked into a place and said, "Are you hiring?" Right. And she asked specifically for, empowerment groups and things like that. And I had to tell her, well, we have to do the job search first, but let me see what I can do with my boss. So I went back to my boss and I told her what this was. I said, if we put her in a job search, she's going to fail. And she has 5 kids, the little ones, they don't all live with her. She just got out of a terrible situation. We really need to be mindful of who she is, where she's at, and the situation we're putting her in, which is setting her up to fail. Right. And so, love my boss, Virginia Outerkirk, if you're out there, this is for you. She said, I don't know, but let me find out. Let me ask. What's the worst thing they can say is no. We actually got a internal policy changed where we were able to give her good cause for mental health services for 3 months that CalWorks wouldn't pay for, but Medi-Cal did pay for. But because CalWorks didn't pay for it, it showed up that she was non-compliant, and which meant that when my cases got read, if her case got read, it would be a mark against me. Well, somehow in those 3 months, it got read twice. I don't know how that happened, right? But when she was done and she was empowered, I mean, wonderful things happened. I mean, it wasn't just a straight up, I mean, it's a great
Right.
story. And it's a story I tell in a class. It usually takes about 20 minutes, right? But she's now, last time I heard, she's working, she's, a business owner, right? And it's something that is a success story that is something that if we just followed procedure to get to the results, then the result would have been negative,
Yeah.
right? So, to pay attention to the journey. How do we get to those results rather than just focusing on results?
So, so let me for the people who aren't in our industry, just do a little clarification real quick. And this has everything to do with results. WPR in our industry, WPR is Beetlejuice comes out today. This is one of those things you don't say three times in a mirror. But WPR is an acronym for work participation rate. And from a federal standpoint, that's how states are measured, results driven, to how many people they have engaged in certain activities. The activities being work experience, some college, job search, job readiness, but basically work focused type of activities, which of course the goal of most of the all of the welfare to work programs, whatever the names of them are, is to take people who are reliant on public assistance benefits and to get them back into the workforce. That's the goal. The way it's measured, the results is through that work participation rate. And so, and I'm not a WPR expert, but federally, I think it's like one parent households, 50% is the measurement. And then for two parent households, they want 90% doing the required hours. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Okay. This is where that result to me is flawed from a federal level. If you have 90% of two parent households doing 35 hours a week of work activities and 50% of one parent households doing work participation rate activities, you still have people doing like if my county or my state is meeting that requirement where we've got all of those people in work related activities, they're still on cash aid. They're still on cash aid. That means they're working enough to meet our requirements, but still in poverty. That means that they're going through the motions and still in poverty. So the focus of so many of these welfare to work programs is meet that federal requirement. But that means you keep people on aid and you keep them dependent, which is the opposite of what we're trying to do. It doesn't make any sense to me that that's the measurement of your success. I would think if I was, again, in charge of the whole system, I would think how many people come in, receive services, get off of aid, and stay off of aid. That would be a measure of success. But the revolving door happens because there's such a push for short term employment. Get them a job, get them a job, get them any job, enough to put them over income for the programs. But if we're not, like you mentioned, getting people like the baseline foundation of their skills, of their ability to cope with stress, their stability in their housing, stability in their families, then one little shakeup in their world, a car breaks down, their childcare falls through, their boss, says something crazy to them or whatever. If I don't have the skills to respond to those real life, everyday things, I'm not going to keep that job. I'm not going to keep it. And so I'm going to come right back in the door. And here we are again. Let's get you in your 20, 30, or 35 hours and keep you dependent on us. Like, what are we really doing there? Mm-hmm. So I think that the most important part of results is they have to be tied to what you're trying to do, because people can manipulate measurements. If I could tell you a work story real quick, I'm going to tell you about my old work boyfriend. He wasn't my work husband because he was a little trampy, but he was my old work boyfriend. And we sat right next to each other. I'm not going to say his name, but anybody who knows me knows who he is. He, on paper, was the best employment counselor in the whole place. His numbers were immaculate, to the point where our supervisor would call him the king. Oh, and he loved that. This is why he was not my work husband, my work boyfriend, because he was so full of himself. Great guy. But he, on paper, had 93% engagement for anybody who works in the industry. That's amazing. And the reason that he had 93% engagement was as soon as you didn't participate, he would put you into sanction. And the thing with the way that, again, results, the way that we were measured was in order for a case or a family to be counted in your measurements or in your statistics is that they had to be on your caseload from the first of the month to the end of the month. So if you didn't have them a full month, it wouldn't count against you. It wouldn't be included in your measurement. So what he figured out is that he would only keep the people who had perfect attendance. And if you missed a day, an hour that would mess up his engagement numbers, he would put you into that non-compliance and sanction you, because as soon as you got sanctioned, you moved off of his caseload. So if he didn't have you for the full month, then it wouldn't count. So he was the sanction king. What they were measuring is his engagement, 93%. But what they didn't see is that he was sanctioning about half of his caseload every month. And putting someone in a sanction, for those who don't know, the work doesn't help them get employed any faster. It puts them basically in timeout. You're putting him in timeout. So that's why his numbers look so good, because he sanctioned everybody. Like we used to tease him. We had like this running joke in the office that they'd say, "Hi, good morning, good morning. I have a question." Sanction, sanction immediately. If you have a question, sanction. And he would never answer his phone. That was the other thing, because you could clear a sanction over the phone if you had a good reason for missing. Like my car broke down, we could undo that. We could stop the process. But he refused to talk. Once he initiated it, that was it. He'd never talk to you again. And so people would get sanctioned all of the time. So 93%, the king, the king. Now let me just tell you, they changed the way they measured. After you got sanctioned, you had to hold that case for 3 months to try to re-engage. And wouldn't you know, his 93% dropped drastically. I don't remember what it went down to, but we laughed. We said, "You've been beheaded as the king." You've been beheaded, because the
Yeah.
way we're measuring is different. And so your results change on how you are being measured. So this is like, again, for leaders, a big, I don't know, I'm on my soapbox begging you, what are you measuring? Is it realistic? And is it in line with what you're trying to accomplish? Because individuals are almost always going to go into self-preservation, especially if their effectiveness is based on these results.
Yeah.
How do we do this in a way that's fair, where people can feel connected to the work and not feel like I'm on the line all the time? If I don't meet these numbers, I'm going to be in trouble. But what if I'm contributing or building? Like you said, what if my person can't go right to work? They need mental health services and they need good cause. But if I'm looked as lesser of a good employee because I have more people in good cause, and that reflects poorly on me as an employee, then I'm not going to be as flexible with the needs of the people. But if you're saying the needs of the people are most important, but you're measuring me differently, then that's a complete disconnect. You're never going to get the results you want. It's contradictory.
It's churn and burn, right?
Churn and burn. Mhm.
Yeah. And I mean, I know somebody who used to practice what was called the three ring rule,
Mhm.
which, if one of the measurements that people have, or one of the requirements that you have, is you have to make a monthly contact with your client um every month. So if you don't speak to them, or if they don't come in for a meeting, or if they don't turn something in, if you don't talk to them, you have to reach out to them just to see how things are going. And you can, if it gets to voicemail or anything else like that, say attempted contact with client, you know, phone number phone number disconnected, you can't find another number, or left a message with client to call me back. Those are things that are check marks. I knew somebody who um, used the three ring rule, right? So if they called and it rang three times, they could hang up, right? And then they would enter into case notes, cut and paste, attempted call to client, no response, right? So that kept them in compliance for their job. But what's special about that three ring rule? How many rings does it usually take for it to go to voicemail? You know,
Mhm.
four
Or
times,
yeah.
right? So, that was something that, was practiced. They thought it was funny. They would, I'm not necessarily brag about it, but just laugh about it. Like that was,
Right.
you know, oh yeah, well, I just, those people are not going to answer their phones anyway. And so this is the attitude that you have working with your clients. They're not going to answer the phone anyway, rather than I hope they answer because I'd really love to engage with them, right?
Right.
Or I'd really like to find out what's going on. Maybe we can get them to receive services, anything else. No, it's just okay, well, I hope they don't answer, right? I,
Yeah.
I hope my 1 o'clock doesn't show up, right? And if that's the attitude that we have, then does that show in the service that we provide our folks, right? And a lot of like we talked about, that idea of, well, what they should be doing. Who makes those rules? Who made the rules that we should be, people should be working, they should be working first, we should have them find that job, right? You know, and without consideration of maybe other things that are challenging, folks who are working, right? Maybe folks who
Right.
have a job. Oh, I know this, right? If something happened where I lost a chunk of my income, I'd find a job, right? But I'm also highly educated, highly experienced. I'm connected. I know people, right? So it wouldn't be the hardest thing for me to find a job. Maybe not find a job exactly where I wanted financially, but I would be able to find a job. That is me, right? And how many people live off that idea of the golden rule, treat people the way you want to be treated, right? So
Mhm.
I can find a job. Why can't you find a job? If you're just sitting at home and being frustrated, why don't you just get up? I get frustrated all the time. I don't necessarily like my job,
Mhm.
all the time, but I do it and I suck it up. Why can't you? Right. And
Yeah.
if we are focused on how we feel, are we ever focused on how other people feel things or experiencing things, right? That idea of the golden rule, right, is different than the platinum rule, right? And the
Right.
platinum rule is rather than treat people the way you want to be treated, treat people the way they want to be treated. Right. So, how do we find out how somebody wants to be treated or what they're experiencing? We have to get to know them, right? Not take things, we've talked about taking things personally in conflict, taking things personally in terms of our work ethic, our idea of value systems, right? Maybe, a lot of what we were raised, if you believe, Freud and Jung, I mean, a lot of what we did as a child, really carries out into our adulthood in our personality. And not everyone was raised the same way. Not everyone was
Right.
raised with the same values and the same ideas of what needs to get done, or the same problem solving, you know, um, capabilities, right? And sometimes, people learn differently than others, right? That I should only have to tell you once, right? You tell me
Right.
once, you're going to have to tell me some more times because I am not an auditory learner, and only 25% of us are. So you want to, treat me. I tell people, you want me to do something exactly the way you want it done, treat me as if I'm a second grader. Write it down, walk me through it. And once you do that, then I'll be able to carry it out for you. Don't look at my PhD. So well, you're supposed to know how to deal with this. I'm not in your head
Mhm.
until I'm able to transfer, you know, your brain into my head, and we can do what was that movie where they transferred the brain into you know, anyways, right? You know, until I can read your mind, I need to see it laid out. And I'm not the only one. 60% of us prefer that, but we're not going to say it because we don't want you to judge us as being less, right?
Mhm.
And so people go about with these assumptions. Well, they should be able to do this. Why don't they do this? I would do this. When you recognize it ain't about you, that's half the battle,
Mhm.
right? It ain't about you. It's about them. How do we help them understand what it is that they're dealing with and how they can deal with it more effectively? And if they're feeling judged when they walk through the door, they're not going to, trust you that you have their best interest in mind. So why am I going to share information with you? Why am I
Yeah.
going to share my deepest, darkest thoughts with you? Right. And that's really the value of that trust and managing conflict. Hey, look, I messed up. I didn't do all my job contacts, or I missed last week's appointment. I'm not going back because they're just going to judge me and think that I'm just a deadbeat or whatever. When my son was sick, or 30% of clients of folks on public assistance have a child with special needs, right? And so those are things that are, those are considerations. Maybe we don't always have childcare, adequate childcare for that. Maybe we don't always have, you know, um, transportation. Maybe we had a ride and that ride flaked out on us. I had a client who had their sister was a childcare provider, and they called me on Monday and said, Carl, I didn't go to work. I had to quit on my first day. Why? Well, because my sister met somebody on Plenty of Fish or whatever, and they went to Vegas and got married, and she didn't come back over the
Wow.
weekend. Right? These are things that happen to people. They haven't happened to me, but just because they haven't happened to me, does that mean that I should say, we'll just suck it up, rub some dirt on it, right? Bad things happen to bad people. Or are we supposed to utilize, that the E word, right? That empathy, right? The Brene Brown, you know, um, stuff, then where we think about, okay, so people are going through problems. How are they going through them, right? If we're thinking about results, if we're thinking about getting them here, what if at this point, this is as far as they can go functionally? What else can we do to help them gradually get to where we want them to be and without judging them non-compliant, right?
Well, yep. All of that goes back to what's the goal. So what's the result that we're looking for? If I think about your example that you gave, the 3 ring rule, what's the purpose of those phone calls, right? On this journey, what's the end result that we're looking for? We're looking for connection. We're looking to talking to people to keep them moving in the right direction, to help them navigate some of those challenges. Okay, your sister got married in Vegas this weekend without telling you, you lost your child care. What did we learn from this? Right? Like not like my husband, nothing. We learned nothing. We had fun. No, but what did we learn from this? We know now maybe having a backup plan is a good idea. So what are some options for a backup plan if your primary child care provider is not available? What could you do to make sure you can get to where you need to be on time? With going back to your 3 ring person, again, it was there's a lack of accountability because this person is openly stating, I'm avoiding doing my job. I'm purposely avoiding connecting with people. I'm saying that I'm doing it. I'm making a very half-ass attempt at doing it and hoping and praying they don't answer so I don't have to do my job. But where's now the accountability, not just from supervisors or from the leadership, but from peers to say, so you let it go 3 rings and that's it. And then you document it. So I know our goal is to connect with people and find out what's going on and help them navigate this really complicated process. How is that letting it ring 3 times and not attempting again helping get us to that collective goal of getting people off of aid? Or how is that helping getting people off of aid? Oh, it's not. Okay, well, what other options do we have here? Well, what could we do that's going to get us closer to that goal? That's like the type of accountability that's necessary. It doesn't have to be punishment. I don't need a supervisor to call and say, so Carl, it's been brought to my attention that you have a 3 ring rule where you let it ring 3 times and hang up and don't leave messages and document it. The expectation is that do you see, I can go into that super formal accountability, which sometimes that works for people, it's necessary. But wouldn't it feel different coming from a peer? Like, what are you doing? I had those conversations, by the way, with my little loving work boyfriend. What the hell are you doing, dude? Like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
how is sanctioned people helping anybody? I know it's making it look good on paper, but these are people, they're suffering, and you're being a jerk. What's
Mm,
going on with that?
mm,
That's the accountability that's going to get to results, which is the we versus me conversation. When we think about results as an organization, are we looking at collective results or are we looking at individualistic results? And if we're looking at individualistic results, how are we squashing things like competition and ego and practices where I will win at all costs, even if that means that you have to lose? Like, in the grand scheme of things, how are we looking at things on a collective way? Of course, you still have to give people individual feedback, right? Because I can't hold you responsible for what somebody else did. But what I can do is create an environment and a culture where we win or we lose. There's no me in that. Where are we? And so if I have a teammate who's struggling, or if I have a teammate who's doing the ring rule, or if I have a team member who's sanctioning everybody, that's affecting our collective results. How do we call people up? Not call them out, but call people up to really support that collective vision where it's important to everybody. The results are important to everybody, enough so that we can be accountable to each other, and we can be accountable to our customer and to our leadership and to our stakeholders and to our governing bodies or whoever we're responsible for. But we're all kind of working towards the same goal. And we're held to that standard of meeting those results. And if you are doing something that directly contradicts that from a place of ego or whatever the case may be, how do we create that culture?
Well, what culture are we creating, right?
Mhm.
So we creating culture. We're creating culture by having those types of conversations, and we're also creating culture by not having those types of
Right.
conversations. We're also creating culture by creating those individual goals that aren't necessarily that are connected to specific results. But, you know, if those results come at whatever cost, what's the goal, right? What is it that we're trying to do? Not just our results, not just our goals for the year, but how do they connect to our value system, our practices, our mission, right? What is it that we're doing? How are we doing it? All of those have to be considered. If if leadership is not considering how things are getting done, right? And it's just win at all cost, or I mean, I've worked in places where there's a competition, right? There's the idea of stack ranking, right? Who has the least amount of errors, who has the most sales, right? Who does the most referrals, the most loans, whatever it is, right? And you are on a ladder, and people are at the top of the ladder, people are at the bottom of the ladder, right? And some people are motivated by that, right? I like competition. I like to see myself, um, you know, pulling my weight, right? So that's something that's important to me. I don't have to be first. I just want to make sure that I'm in that position where that I'm doing good work and you count on me to do good work, wherever that falls on the ladder, right? But there are some folks who they want to be at the top of the ladder at all costs, right? So you give me a ranking. If I'm not number one, how do I get to number one, right? And if it's
You're not
about
first, you're last.
results, and if it's
You're
about
not first, you're last.
results, right? Yeah, yeah, Ricky Bobby, sure. But if you're not first, how do I get to number one? Well, I have to hit this result. Okay, so if I need to hit that result, then maybe I need to push this person towards finding a job rather than they're thinking about going to school to retool, right? And maybe, I've been working, yeah, I've been a mechanic for 15 years. My back's starting to hurt. Maybe maybe I want to do IT. Okay, well,
Yeah.
if you're about getting that person to find a job, well, maybe you should, get that job in a mechanic shop while you're going to school, right? Rather than, oh, your back's hurting. Okay, well, have you had a chance to look at that? Talk to a doctor about it? Maybe you can set up an appointment, come back and talk to me. No, 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 no. We need you to find a job because I need to be at the top of this ranking, right? And so winning is one thing, but winning at all costs, what is the challenge? And also, where are we finding this idea of what success is if it isn't from our value system, if it isn't how we get things done, if it's getting things done, right? That's oftentimes, like I said, coming from personal beliefs, personal ideas of, what people are doing. And when people fail you, we're in a people business. So we're dependent upon other people being successful in what they're doing. We're dependent upon clients showing up for work. I mean, showing up to meetings, showing up to Zoom calls, turning in their job contacts, completing plans, right? And so if they aren't following up, then we're seen as not being successful. It's just like with a manager, right? At the end of the day, the performance of a manager is based off of their team's performance, right? Unless you have a manager who is controlling it all and doing it all because they don't trust their team, right? And then
Mhm.
that's a whole other issue. Why is it that you are, you know, getting all that stuff done when you have people that can do it? How are you building that capacity to help them help you, right? And so, but it bounces down, and you see people, if we're supposed to be helping people, but the results are to find work, and we have folks that are working with people that are results focused and not process focused, right? They may judge them as less than. Well, we've done job contacts for 5 weeks and haven't found a job. What's going on with this person? What's wrong with them? Right? As opposed to, so what's happening with that person? What's going on?
Mhm.
How can we have that conversation? Sometimes we need to pump the brakes and have a real conversation about where are you? What type of jobs are you looking for? Right? But that takes a little bit more thought process. I mean, I don't know. Tiff, how do you feel about being a problem solver? How good of a problem solver are you?
I don't have any problems, so I'm great at it.
Okay.
I'm a
But
great
this is
problem
something,
solver. No,
this,
but yeah, to me that everything has a solution. And I have to say this is something I've developed out of necessity. I didn't have necessarily an easy upbringing. So I think this is where my empathy for people in public assistance comes from because I didn't have anything handed to me. Like I was on my own at 17. I bought my first house when I was 19. I was navigating life as this adult. And you can have this image in your mind like, oh, life is going to be perfect. You'll figure it out. But the truth is life happens all the freaking time. And when problems arise, I don't think I get emotionally like caught up in them. And this is something that with age has come up. If there's a problem, my first thought is, okay, this problem's happening. Let's find a solution. Let's find a solution. What can we do? What can we do? What are our options? What are our choices? Who can I call? What can I do? What's in my toolbox? What choices? How can I look at this differently? I think it's just an innate mindset for me because again, problems. Let me give you an example of like big problems. 2008. Do you remember the housing collapse of 2008? So I had gone through an ugly divorce and I was renting. So I still owned my other home, but I left it so that I could, leave the relationship. I left everything behind. I started from scratch and I was renting. In 5 years, I lived in 8 different places. Not by my own volition, not because I wanted to move, but because the housing, like just the housing in general, was so chaotic that 3 houses that I rented, 3 of them in the 5 year span foreclosed. And the owner didn't tell me until the bank came and knocked on the door and told me I had to leave 3 times. And so now I'm scrambling I have 3 kids. I have like responsibilities. I have a full-time job. Half the time I'm going to school. Like I have all of these things going on. And I'm like, okay, all I know is I don't have time to feel sorry for myself. I've got to find another place to live in the next 15 days. I don't have money saved up for a down payment because I'm paycheck to negative paycheck. Like, how do I make it happen? Like, there's always a solution. I always found a way. I always found a way. And I don't know how. If you ask me to go back, how'd you do it, Tiff? I don't know. I don't think about it. I just do it. I just figure it out. And I think that's what gives me so much compassion in working with people in general is that problems happen. It's not about blame. It's not about whose fault is this, who should have done what. It's like it happened. Let's figure it out, move forward. If there's protections we can put in place for next time, like let's try to do that, but not from a like my husband worked for a company that if a problem happened, they would spend hours talking about who dropped the ball and blaming and whose fault and who didn't do what and what happened in the process. And then the discussion, no problem was ever solved. It was just who do we throw under the bus to make us feel better. So that gets in the way of results. That that gets in the way of results. But I don't know. I'm trying to like bring it back to this like big picture of again, what are we trying to do here? This collectiveness. By the way, I'm super competitive. I have to be first. I don't want to like throw anybody under the bus to win, but I will exhaust myself to be number one. So I have to really be conscientious of when I'm being too competitive and where I have to let things go. That's something I struggle. I'm not allowed to play games with my family, is all I'm telling you. Like I don't get invited to Uno night. I don't get to play Monopoly with the rest of them. I flipped a couple tables in my time, just saying. But with that competitiveness, it can be motivating, but it also can be like the worst thing. Look at Wells Fargo. And not the dead person in the Wells Fargo, you're failing in so many different ways. But if you look at the scandal with Wells Fargo like a few years ago, they had people opening up all kinds of accounts for people without permission, without their knowledge. They opened these accounts. Why? Because they had results that they had to meet, and so they're doing it to meet these requirements. And again, these competitions and what branch can open the most accounts, this, that, and the other. But what was the goal that they were trying to do? Generate more revenue? Well, how many millions and billions of dollars did it cost them in fines and penalties and having to reimburse people for those accounts? And how many customers did they lose because people don't trust Wells Fargo anymore? Like there's costs to some of this competitiveness and this drive for results. And again, sometimes the results that you're going for are not sustainable. And so if we're saying, like, for example, in the employment, like jobs, 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 everybody needs to get a job, and that's what we strive for, and that's the results we're measuring. Well, what happens when there's no more jobs to get in your community? What happens when all of the jobs that in a certain skill level have been exhausted and there are no more entry level jobs, and what they need are people with higher education, but we haven't pushed education because we've been so focused on jobs? Or we get people those low paying wage jobs because again, maybe that's where the skill set is at. And now long term, they're going to stay in poverty, maybe making just enough to not qualify for our programs, but not enough to have a good, you know, a good life where they're still living paycheck to paycheck and having that economic instability, which we're fighting for. Again, one eviction away from being homeless. Like that's not long-term success. That's not the goal. That's not the thriving communities, the self-sufficiency that we talk about in our vision statements. But it's a band-aid on a bullet hole, like you said earlier. So I don't know. For me, it always boils down to what are the most important things. Like if we really did what we were supposed to do as an organization, as a company, as a bank, whatever you're at, what is the most important thing? And if you were really successful, what would that look like? And then how do you measure those results and make sure that all of your policies and procedures, your culture support whatever those main things are? And if they don't, it's not the right thing to do. It's not the right thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, well, what is the right thing to do, right? And what I was talking about with, with the idea of the problem solving, how often do we have a solution within 5 seconds of what somebody's saying? And how often do we push it on them,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And yeah, it's one of the great things, when you learn about coaching, you recognize it ain't
Yeah.
about you, right? And we're all great problem solvers. We're not in the positions we are without being good problem solvers. But my solution to a problem may not work for somebody else,
Right.
right? If and so it makes a difference. And what I found just in my coaching journey is I'm much more aware of the fact that even if I'm asking questions, open-ended questions that help for self-discovery,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not careful, I can manipulate those questions to have them come to the result that I thought was best for them, which is something that, you know, is different, right? Hey, people can always come to me and I have a solution, or I have options on how they can solve this, right? And what I'm recognizing now is, how would they solve it? Is it the same as me? If it is, cool. If it's not, that's cool as well. I have to
Mm-hmm.
get out of my own head of no, that's not the right way to do it. That's not how I would do it. Right. But if they have a solution that's different than mine, okay, cool. So talk to me about how that's going to happen. What is it going to look like? What does success for you look like accomplishing this task? right? Coming up with this solution. And, either they're going to come up with something that's sound or they're going to come up with something that maybe doesn't necessarily work. And then we go back to the drawing board. But for me, just to right off the bat say, well, you should do this, you should do that, you're setting people up for failure without really having them think about how this works for them, right? We may have the perfect solution, right? That has worked for us, right? If it's not something that is in their wheelhouse, right? And sometimes I have noticed, with my daughter, and I love my daughter. My daughter's killing it right now. She's about to graduate with her bachelor's next year. She's getting her master's, and English is a second language, and super proud of her. Um, but she also is one of those learners like me with, if I've never done it before, I have a hard time knowing how to do something, right? And sometimes it can be just super simple, right? One of the hardest things I had to do as a trainer working for the bank was one time I had to order lunch for 30 people. And I had the hardest time calling Panera Bread and figuring out that lunch order and all the specifics about when it should be dropped off, where it should be dropped off, what door, all these things. That was not, we have coordinators that do that. And, maybe they're not as highly educated as me, but they are much more experienced and adept and enjoy doing that. Right. And so that was definitely something that I recognized. Folks are in positions because, they're valuable and they have their value in whatever position it is. And so it's something I recognize. This is not something that I do well. I didn't beat myself up about it. And if somebody wants to judge me because I can't order from Panera Bread, I order from DoorDash every day. It's just for 30 people. So sit on it. Right. But just thinking about that idea of, you know, what works for me doesn't always work for somebody else. So my daughter, she'll say, she's got a car and her lease is coming up, and she's like, "So what do I do?" And I said, "Well, you just go to the dealership and find out what's well. How do I ask them, right?" And it's easy to say, "Well, what do you mean how to ask? Walk up to them and ask them. What's wrong with you? You're 23 years old. You're an adult. You should know how to do all this stuff." That's not going to work for my daughter. If I'm sitting there scolding her, making her
Right.
feel this small because she's not doesn't know exactly what to say to a car dealer, that's not going to work. And what's going to happen? She's going to go to the dealer, and when she comes back, I'm going to say, "Did you ask him about this? Did you ask him about that? Did you ask him about this?" And she's going to say, "No." I said, "Well, why did you do it?" Right? So we set people up for failure all the time. We send them out to do things, and they're not equipped to do things. We haven't helped them talk through the process of being able to do it correctly. And then when they come back and fail, we blame it on them, and it's bullshit, right? And so, what do I, it's well, just you walk up to them. What is it that you want to do? Well, I want to renew, or finance the rest of my car. Okay, do you want to keep your car? Yeah. Okay, so, what do you want to tell the person? I want to keep my car and I want to be able to finance it. Okay, and then so and I said, she goes, "What else do I need?" And we talked about those things that you need to bring with you. And then at the end of it, she goes, "Okay, can you come with me?" Yeah, if that's going to make you feel better about doing that, well, I'm not going to be the one leading this conversation, right?
Right.
But if you want me to be there to support you through it so that the next time you buy your car, you buy it on your own and you don't need my help, then uh, check mark as a dad, right? I've
Right.
raised a child who is now an adult who can handle adult business, right? So, I mean, if we're just, you don't know how to do this, you've never done that before. Oh, you don't know Cal saws? I mean, we were in the same training. How long have you been in this in this job, right? You're a program director. You should know this stuff already, right? How often do people get scolded and judged as less than because they ask a question that has a simple answer or just would take 5 minutes of asking them how they feel about things and what are some things that they've done, what are some things that they would do to help bring out success. But if we just keep them at, keep thinking of success as well, we know we're going to be solving people's problems, which is great. But then what happens when we're not there and they relied on us?
Yeah.
We're setting them
Well,
up for failure.
yeah. Well, and this is like the results conversation for me.
Yeah.
One of the questions I ask helping professionals is, do you want to build dependency or do you want to build capacity? So this is the result. What are you hoping to accomplish? Again, 99.9% of people say we want to build capacity. And this is true for leaders as well. Leaders, helping professionals, anybody. We want to help people develop and grow. So now we have to go back. If that's the result is capacity, we want to build capacity. We have to go back and look at the behaviors and the things that we do. Are they building dependency or are they building capacity?
Right.
Because if I, again, going back to your example of your daughter going to take care of her car, if I say, well, daughter, this is what you need to do. You need to do X, Y, Z. You need to ask them these questions, fill out these forms, and do this. You've now built dependency because now the next time she's got to go get a car, she's going to say, Dad, remember last time you did this for me? Can you do it for me again? But when we build capacity, we help people grow into their best self, not our best version of us, their best version of them. So what do you want? What have you tried before? This is why I love coaching. This is why I'm so connected to coaching, because the result that I'm looking for in life is to build capacity, not dependency. I did this with parenting. My kids are all very independent. They don't rely on me financially. They still moral support. I give lots of moral support to my kids, but they're young adults. And what's really funny is I stopped parenting them and I started coaching them very early on. And what choices do you want to make, and what do you think will happen if you go that direction? What are you hoping will happen? What options do you have? Like helping them develop their own thinking process, because I did not want them to be dependent on me. I wanted to be an empty nester. I love being an empty nester. My nest being empty is the happiest thing that's ever happened to me. Love you, kids. Glad you're away. So I really wanted to build capacity in them as young adults to be able to manage life. And so can I solve problems? I'm absolutely a problem solver. Do I solve their problems for them? Absolutely not. They're not my problems to solve. And so I'll hear you out. I'll listen to you. I'll brainstorm with you. I'll help you explore. I'll help you think about things. But at the end of the day, you get to choose your own adventure. And I feel the same way with clients. Like if I'm helping you navigate our very complicated government systems, I'll help you navigate our systems. I'll help you make informed decisions. I'll maybe fill the gaps in knowledge that you don't know. Like this, if you take this route, this is what will happen. If you take this route, this is what will happen. If you take this route, this is what will happen. What works best for you and your family? Right? Or maybe you don't know what you don't know. So here are some options that you have. So what do you need? Here are a bunch of things that you can do that might meet that need. What questions do you have? What sounds good to you? How do you want to fit this into your plan? Like I can't decide that for you. It's not my problem to solve. And for me, and I don't know if you've heard this phrase before, but it's one of my favorite mindsets when it comes to coaching is I'm willing to listen to your problem without making it mine. I'm willing to listen to your problem without making it mine. So my goal is not to go in and solve anybody else's problem, because I want to hold you capable and know that you can solve your own problem, because your results will belong to you. I can still support you without doing it for you. And as a leader, I take that same approach. I can help you navigate. I can tell you what the expectations are. I can talk to you about what results we're looking for. We can talk about your challenges. You can come up with solutions. I don't have to do all of the thinking for you, because you can think for yourself. But I also am going to hold you accountable if you're not making decisions that are going to lead to the results that we're looking for. I can be accountable for not giving you the tools, the resources, the clarity, and doing the work and getting the results. So I'm not going to, if we're not getting results, it's not immediately somebody else's fault. It's a we. What are we doing? What do we need to do as a whole? Maybe we need clarity in what we're looking for. Maybe we need clarity in the policy. Maybe we have unrealistic expectations of what people are supposed to be doing. I have to be willing to look at all of that before I point the finger at anybody else. But where are we? There's no me and we. I'm just saying there's no me and we. And I think too often people become too focused on their own individual results, to the point that I'm just checking boxes. I'm not looking at the big picture. The 3-ring person is the one. I'm checking all the boxes. I look good on paper, but are you really contributing to outcomes that we're hoping for? Probably not. But are we holding that person account? Are we holding ourselves accountable for allowing that type of behavior to be so openly expressed without any pushback?
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. And that goes back to expectations, honoring expectations, being committed to honoring those expectations, holding people accountable. And then, I mean, just talking about, are we holding our clients capable? Are we holding our staff capable?
Mhm.
Because you can
Yep.
train somebody in how you want them to talk to you,
Yeah.
right? Why do we solve problems? It's a dopamine hit. We feel better. When we solve
Rescuer.
problems, we feel very good about ourselves. When we're empathetic, it's a serotonin hit. We feel really good about helping somebody feel better about themselves. Sometimes we can get addicted to that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And
It's the rescuer in the
recognize,
drama triangle. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. So we end up being that um that person who people come to solve issues, right? But what if we train them to come to us for everything? How are we holding them capable? And what is it doing to our workload? And we complain about how we're overworked. How often is it having conversations that at the end of the day would be meaningless because if we held our folks capable, they would be able to make those decisions without us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. For
So
sure.
you can be an empty nester because your kids don't need to come to you all the time. Hey, mom, I need this, I need that. Right. So
And
for
that's why I
sure.
can spend all my days at Chili's, living my best life.
Eating
Sorry.
those what are those tortilla rolls or whatever the hell they are. Those are hella good. Those egg rolls, the Mexican egg
Southwest
rolls,
egg rolls,
whatever.
baby.
Yes, that's it. That's the
Although,
bomb. Right.
although I just
So
go for the chips and salsa. Yeah.
when I was down at Patton the last when we were watching the Olympics in between classes, and I went to Chili's twice to, so I had the same thing every time. When I watched the Olympics, it was awesome. So all right.
Yes.
So just wrapping up that idea of results, what do results look like? Right? What would they look like when they are accomplished? How do we want to accomplish those? Right?
Yep.
And how do we evaluate success? Right? Which is definitely an important topic and something we're going to talk about in our next episode is in terms of performance management, measuring performance, right, with our staff and in our lives. And so, what is that result that you want to accomplish? How is it tied to the values and the mission and the overall vision of your organization? How are employee results tied to that overall mission? If you tie employees accomplishing things to that overall vision and mission, and also how we do them, they perform better, they're more engaged. So, how do we do those things? And how do we keep folks focused on the right things? Right? It's more important to do the right things than to do, a lot of things. Right? There's
Right.
the Dr. Randy Posh, who, you know, rest in peace, but I use a time management video he does. He says no one cares about how polished the underside of the banister is, right? And so are we focused on doing things right or are we focused on the right things?
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah.
All
All
right.
right.
I got our three questions. You ready? I know you
Okay.
asked a bunch of them right now. I know. We didn't talk about it. Here we go.
Lay
Here's
it on
three
us,
questions
sister.
you can ask. What are your top three desired results? So think about like from an organizational standpoint, if you can nail it down to what are the three main things that you're trying to do, what would that look like? The second question I have is what ways can you measure your individual contribution to those collective results? So again, what are those three main things? What are you doing to contribute to those collective results? And the last question I have here is what can you do to contribute what can you do to contribute to your organization's collective results? So how are you measuring it and what can you do to again contribute to those collective results? So this sometimes means getting out of your comfort zone and maybe having those accountability conversations with a peer. Because if I have a peer who's falling short because they're following the three ring rule, that's impacting our collective results. And so how do we mitigate that? That's the question. So I'm looking forward to performance management. I can't wait. I get so excited. I've got some math for you, some math and equations. So I'm ready
I did
for it.
not know math was part of this podcast. I am
Math is going to be part of it. Yes.
might have to pass. Can we get a guest? Can we get a That's not. I mean, when we get into X's and Y's and
Oh,
sines and
yeah. Oh,
cosines
we're
and
doing slopes. We're doing all of it. We're doing calculus. No, it's just one little equation, but
What's
we'll work.
calculus?
That'll be a later. That'll be a later problem. That's not a today problem. That'll be a later problem.
Well, all right. Well, let's handle that problem later. So, thank you for being here. We definitely appreciate y'all showing up. And until next time, I'm Carl.
And I'm Tiff.
And
Catch us
keep
on
it
the
real.
gram. Keep
Right.
it real. Catch us on the gram on the book of faces.
Yes, we are
Find
there.
us.
All
Yeah.
right.
All
Bye,
right.
y'all.
See you later.